Hello, Lions fans, and welcome to another episode of Believe in Lions. I am Brandon Brown, joined again by Glover Quin, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Glover's the man of the hour this week. We got the Lions getting ready to take on the Texans. That's Glover's two former teams. Glover, you currently reside in Houston, so that's a pretty cool thing. We'll obviously get to that in a couple minutes, but we're going to talk about the Lions taking down Green Bay in Lambeau. We talked about that a good bit last week and how you actually used to say it wasn't that bad to play in Lambeau Field. Maybe when it's not below 30, 30 below or something like that. And it wasn't super cold, but man, it was a mess and it was sloppy and the Lions still got it done. But the news of the day here at just before 11 a.m. Is that the Lions have made a trade and they will be acquiring Zadarius Smith from the Cleveland Browns for some pretty minimal. I mean, really, some late round draft picks, I think a fifth and a sixth. And I think the Lions get a seventh back. I may have those numbers a little bit off. But obviously the focus is the player. Zadarius Smith, he's 32 years old, 6'4", 275, big dude coming off the edge. He's got 5 sacks through 9 games. This is obviously, to try to find some production after you lose Aiden Hutchinson, you lose Marcus Davenport. So first thoughts from former big-time safety Glover Quin playing in the back of a defense when you add a pass rusher like this.
I mean, that's a huge move. I mean, I think the whole team knew or felt like we needed to do something. Obviously, you lose Aiden Hutchinson, you lose Marcus Davenport, guys that you depended on to put pressure on the quarterback. And you can clearly see how they were doing that early in the season. Aiden Hutchinson was off to a historic pace at the beginning of the year. And so when you lose him that early, you're sitting there like, okay, I know we got to do something. I know something is going on because this is a year, and in the NFL, you can't allow small windows to go away because those windows don't come around for everybody all the time. So when you got a window where you can actually legitimately get to the top of the mountain and win it, you got to take full advantage of it. And so losing Aiden Hutchinson was a huge blow, but they took their time. They did the due diligence. They found someone that they felt like could come in and, not handicap them in the future, but give them some relief, give them some help for this year. We had seen names. Obviously, you think of the Myles Garrett's off that Cleveland team, or you think of the Max Crosby, but those guys are going to cost a lot. They're going to cost a lot. Could have done probably more harm than good for the team. So you've trusted Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell to make these decisions and build probably one of the best rosters in the NFL at this point. So you got to trust them now, and I trust that they've done a due diligence and they got someone that, like you said, is 32. So it's probably not somebody that they're looking at for long term. We just need some help right now because we got Aiden Hutchinson coming back. Obviously, they're going to be picking up his fifth-year option, so he'll be here for the future. We just need some help right now, and this was a guy that they could get giving up minimum. So hopefully it turns out good and he comes in. I mean, you got to think you got to be – these guys got to be feeling like a rejuvenation of life when it comes to their football careers or their football season. I mean, you look at a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. He was in an awful situation in Tennessee, and now he just got put on an 8-0 team, and he looks like he's a rejuvenated player. So yeah. Coming out of Cleveland, knowing that, hey, man, you're not going anywhere over there. So to be able to get put into a situation, be on a team, now you go from being, I don't know what they were in Cleveland, but now you're leading the NFC 7-1 football team. And they bringing you in to be a force to help get them to the top. Like, you got to feel rejuvenated. You got to feel refreshed. You got to feel a little burst of energy. And hopefully we see that on the field.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it just changes your whole mindset. I mean, these guys are pros. They're making a lot of money. It's very important to them. But it's still like at this point of the season, if you're sitting there at 2-5, 2-6, you're not playing for anything. You're just right. Getting through the year. And to like you said, suddenly go to the favorite in the NFC, maybe the favorite in the entire NFL. I know Kansas City's still sitting there undefeated, and they got a big win last night. You mentioned DeAndre Hopkins, but I don't think anybody wants to play the Lions right now, even the Chiefs. So you add a guy like Zadarius Smith. He's going to be a force over there. He's a pro. He's done it on a lot of different teams. He's been productive everywhere he's been. And that is, I don't want to call it a Band-Aid because he's a very quality player, but he's gonna fix your problem this year, like you said. He's a little bit older. He's, it's crazy to call a 32-year-old old. I'm 40. That's nuts. But in the NFL, he's on the back slope of his career.
Right.
But then you're going to have him for another year or two when Aiden Hutchinson comes back next year, and that just makes your team stronger moving forward as well. And it's crazy. You mentioned Aiden Hutchinson off to a historic start. He's been sitting up, chilling, healing after his surgery for 3 weeks now. He's still 4th in the NFL with 7.5 sacks. So the dude was on a tear. He was on an absolute tear. And it'll be, just that much better when he comes back next year with Zadarius Smith. There's also been the name Carl Granderson floated around a little bit, even after the Zadarius Smith trade has gone through. He's also a defensive end, playing with the Saints right now. Another team kind of just, not really playing for anything at this point. A little younger, 27 years old, 6'5", 261, and he's got 3.5 sacks on the season. So again, we talked about the Lions maybe making a move even when before Aiden got hurt. So this doesn't feel like a knee-jerk reaction. This doesn't feel like a panic kind of move, but how much better will the Lions be with just Zadarius Smith moving forward? And maybe if they do add another guy, because, again, we've talked about it. They lost Aiden and they lost Davenport. They lost both of the guys that they were expecting to be their starting edge rushers, and now maybe you could replace them with 2 different but also pretty productive dudes.
Yeah, I think they only get better because they didn't give up any players. So they don't have the same team. The only thing is, team is about, when you're out there playing well, you have a great vibe with the guys. You're playing for brotherhood. You're playing together. And that'll be the only thing is how fast and the personality of Zadarius Smith and if they get Granderson, if they can come in and buy into the way the Lions play and how they play. Because sometimes coming from these different organizations, guys are different. They've been raised different. They've trained different. They've played different. And then when you come into a organization like the Lions, getting them to buy into how you do things over here to where we're still one team. We don't have any division created because of personality traits or things like that. But like I said, I think you got to trust that Zadarius Smith is one of those guys that'll fit in because the Lions, Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell made that decision. I don't think they would have just made a knee-jerk reaction. If so, they probably would have did this a long time ago. Mm-hmm. I think they took their time. Obviously winning helps, but they were able to take their time. Pretty sure do some scouting, do some research, talk to a lot of people, and find out a lot about him to feel like he's a guy that could come in and not only help us on the field, but be a good guy in our locker room and fit right into what we're doing. And so I think it helps those guys tremendously because you're not losing any players this year. You still have your whole defense, and you're just adding to what you already have. So I think it's going to help them tremendously going forward.
Yeah, it's exciting. A lot of people in the Detroit area, you listen to sports talk radio or you just watch, what's going on with the Lions. People were getting a little anxious. What's Brad doing? I even heard he's asleep at the wheel. Come on, man. Brad Holmes has been doing his thing for several years now, and it's very apparent on the field. And now they do make a probably just under a tier 1 move, I would say. And that's not a knock on Zadarius Smith, but when you throw the names around like Max Crosby and Myles Garrett, and that was a pipe dream probably, like you said, it was going to cost too much. This is maybe best case scenario, like you said, doesn't change the dynamic of your team at all. You don't have to move any other pieces around, and now you can just plug him in and hope to get as much production as possible. I want to ask you this, Glover, and I don't know how well you'll be able to do it because I don't think you didn't deal with anything like this in your career, and it's a very different position. But it's Tuesday morning. Zadarius Smith gets traded. He'll probably be at the facilities later today. I know they do that stuff very quickly, especially when it's early in the week like this. I would assume he's going to be expected to play on Sunday at Houston. What is that transition like? What should you expect out of him in week 1? what is he doing from now until then? I know practice lightens up as you get later in the week as well. Like, what is all that going to look like for him from now until Sunday night?
Yeah, I mean, I think he probably was in. I mean, he's in Cleveland. Cleveland is right up the road
Not far.
from
Yep.
Detroit, so he probably was up there last night because
Okay.
I mean, we just heard about the trade, but I'm sure his agent, his people knew, hey, you're going to be getting traded. The deal is done. We're just waiting for this or that. So he probably was preparing Sunday after the game. You know what I'm saying? Sunday, Monday, he probably was already preparing. Like, all right, I'm gonna be going to Detroit. Give me a couple things ready. So that once it happens or once they give me the go ahead, I already got a room booked. I mean, we ready to go. So I'm pretty sure he's in Detroit right now.
Okay.
It's Tuesday. He's taking physicals or whatever he got to do. So he's in Detroit right now. He's in the meeting room today, later on today. And, for a guy like that, defensive player that's been playing a long time, a lot of these schemes are somewhat the same. It's really just the terminology. So being able to get on the edge and go and rush, that's something that he'll be able to do. Once it comes to like some of the stunts in the games and things like that, I mean, you have D linemen that'll help you out as far as like, hey, you got this on this play. Hey, we doing a TE stunt or we doing some kind of stunt or things like that. So I think he'll be able to definitely fit in right now and play. Obviously, he's been playing a lot of football, so he understands football. He understands what's going on. Like I say, some of the terminology, things that you call some things in one system, you may call it something else in another system, but it won't be hard for him to pick that stuff up, and he'll be able to get out there on Sunday and play. So I definitely would expect him to be out there on the field playing on Sunday. I mean, but we've seen that with these trades. I mean, you look at DeAndre Hopkins. He left Tennessee and was right there on the field with Kansas City last week. You look at the offensive tackle I was looking at one game. I think his name's Cam Robinson. Big offensive tackle. I think he was in Jacksonville or somewhere.
Yep.
And he got traded to somebody. He was playing, might have been traded to Philly because he's playing against Jackson. I can't remember who it was. But, yeah, he got traded on Wednesday or something like that, and he's out there because, I mean, when you play football, you understand how to play. Like I say, it's a little language barrier that you got to kind of pick up, but you can put all that stuff together. You know how to play. You understand the plays. You know what's going on. So I don't think it's very difficult for those guys to transition, especially when you're looking at somebody that play a position like that. It's hard for like a quarterback possibly because you got a lot going on. But you get a corner, hey, man, you need to come in and cover.
Cover that guy.
Cover your guy, right? You get a returner, things like that. Like when you get running backs, understanding the different blocking schemes could slow you down a little bit depending on how smart you are and things like that. But most of the time, when you're getting trades during the season and you're trading guys to legitimate contenders, a lot of times they're going for guys that have some experience, that they probably have some kind of ties to. I mean, we look back at Zadarius Smith, he may have some kind of ties to somebody that was familiar with Aaron Glenn or the D-line coach to where it's not a complete just, you know what I'm saying? Like he probably got some kind of ties to somebody that coached him at some team to where he understands the terminology already. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like I said, I keep bringing up the DeAndre Hopkins one because that was just on TV last night. But they were just talking about how DeAndre was coached by Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona, and Cliff Kingsbury coached Patrick Mahomes in college at Texas Tech. And so the language and some of the things are kind of familiar. So we can fit in and we can play. So I'm sure there's some ties there, and that's why they went after him. And so I expect him to be out there Sunday full go.
Couple of really good points there you made too. I mean, we're talking about an all-pro guy, 10-year vet. I mean, this is not somebody who's just figuring it out. I mean, he's been doing it a long time at a really high level. And really, I mean, if you kind of go position by position, and I'm sure if there's a defensive end support group out there somewhere, we'll hear about it. But that's got to be one of the easier positions to just get thrown in and play, right? I mean, like you said, go get the passer. If you and talk to your defensive tackle if you got a little stunt game or a twist or whatever it is, and you can figure it out on the fly. Like you said, quarterback and receiver, where you've got to learn route combinations and timing and all chemistry, all that stuff makes it a little trickier. But you bring Zadarius. We want you to pressure the quarterback. Go get him. Create havoc and do what you do. So hopefully, that will show up on the field on Sunday night. The Lions have a very tough contest coming up against the Houston Texans in their house. We'll get to that in just a second. I just want to put a bow on the game from this past Sunday against Green Bay. Lions go in, win 24-14, improve to 7-1. Jared Goff, damn near perfect again, 18-22 for $145 and a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs scores another touchdown. Him and Montgomery go for 138 yards total. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a phenomenal game. I don't know. That dude looks like he could catch a ball no matter what's going on. I mean, there were people dropping balls all over the NFL yesterday in the rain. Not Amon-Ra. I mean, that dude's hands are rock solid. He had 7 catches for 56 yards and a touchdown. I mean, I know a lot of people. I think it was you that said it last week when we talked. You said, okay, they beat up on Dallas. They beat up on who's Tennessee. They put a 50 burger on them. Beat up on Seattle pretty good. If they could go to Lambeau and do it there too, I mean, the sky is absolutely the limit. Everybody already knew that. We know that moving forward, but that's not an easy place to play. It's on the road. It was a messy, sloppy game. The Lions haven't played a lot in the elements this year because they've been playing a lot at home, and that's an indoor facility. What can you say about Detroit's run now as they sit at 7-1 and just handled Green Bay in Green Bay?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've done exactly what you would expect championship caliber teams to do these last few weeks. They went on the road and beat quality opponents. Went to Minnesota when Minnesota was 5-0, playing really good football, and beat those guys. They went to Dallas and avenged that whole thing. They played. They beat Seattle, a team that has had our number for a long time. And then you go on the road and you beat Green Bay, division opponent, six-win team at the moment. And honestly, it really wasn't that close. It was a sloppy game, and they've shown that they can win inside, they can win at home, they can win on the road, they can win outside, they can win in the rain. Because at the essence of it all, your run game, you hear it all the time from the announcers, your run game travels with you. Your run game and your defense, it travels with you. So regardless of where you're playing at, if we can run the ball, and when you look at that offensive line behind Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker and Graham Glass, like when you can run the ball, it just opens up so much more things. I think amon-Ra St. Brown had 7 catches. Maybe one of them at the very end of the game was a super contested catch when Jared Goff threw it into 2 guys. But everything else, I mean, the touchdown catch was an incredible throw, incredible catch. But he's wide open on a lot of these plays. Like, it's not like, it's just wide open because they have so many weapons. They have so many guys, and they're doing such a great job of spreading the ball around, getting everybody involved that it's really hard for teams right now to defend those guys. And so I think the biggest thing right now for the Lions is that they just can't beat themselves. Mm-hmm. I think from a roster standpoint, I don't know if there's a team more talented than the Detroit Lions in the entire NFL. It really comes down to you not beating yourself. And like I said, the one game that we lost was probably due to the Lions beating themselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jared Goff threw the ball 57 times. He hasn't thrown the ball 57 times in 2 weeks combined, right? So yeah, I mean, I just think right now the Lions are they're playing against themselves week in and week out, and if they continue to push themselves to get better, it's a long season, right? Mm-hmm. And I was talking to somebody last night, and I was just like, the thing that you look at over the course of history, you have teams that deal with injuries early in the season and they kind of fight through it, i.e. like at this point, you look at like the Rams team, right? They've been dealing with injuries throughout the beginning of the year. Cooper Kupp goes down, Puka Nacua goes down, and in some kind of way they're still 4-4 or 5-3, like right there in the mix. And sometimes those teams that battle through that stuff early in the season, they get healthy at the end of the season, and then they make a playoff run. And so the Lions have been fairly healthy for the most part this entire year. I mean, we haven't lost anybody offensively except for maybe Frank Ragnow, right? I mean, we've been healthy quarterback, receivers, running backs. Defensively, obviously, you lose a key piece in Aiden Hutchinson. But we've been fairly healthy, right? So we got to continue to stay that way and continue to play good football because we still got 10 weeks left, I think, in the regular season, right? So there's still a lot of football left to be played. You don't want to peak too early. You want to just continue to get better. And you really want to be playing your best football come, end of December and into January. So the Lions are right now probably the hottest team. I don't know if any team wants to play the Lions right now, but they got to make sure they stand that way come the end of the season into the playoffs.
Well, Sunday night, it'll be the Lions at Houston. Houston, you just mentioned they're dealing with injuries on offense, especially. It doesn't look like Nico Collins will be back this week, that he's being evaluated. There's a chance, but he's been out. Stephon Diggs is now out for the season with the torn AC. I mean, that you take those two guys off of your receiving core, that's not the same team. I mean, that's not the same group that CJ Stroud has to throw to. I think Tank Dell is now back. He was injured earlier. So they're kind of figuring it out when it comes to really what made them so good on offense last year and the early part of this year. They're just not the same team. Joe Mixon has given them a little bit of a boost in the run game. And with DeMeco Ryans, their defense is going to show up. Will Anderson's a problem off the edge. They've got some nice young pieces all over the field, and that's why they've been a good team. But they're sitting at 6-3, trying to figure it out a little bit with this injury stuff. And the Lions are, like you said, for the most part, healthy. And the biggest piece that they lost just got replaced by Zadarius Smith. So the Lions are going to be in really good shape. Brian Branch got ejected from that Packers game. I didn't really want to launch into all that. I know you hate that as a DB. I think you and Brian Branch look like almost the same dude out there. I'm sure you've heard that before. But play similar, and he, whatever. He'll be back. He'll be back full strength and chomping at the bit to get after it after getting tossed. Jamison Williams will be back off the suspension. I think the whole getting pulled over with the gun thing that we talked about before. Doesn't sound like anything's coming down from that yet, but he's done with his 2-game suspension. And now you add Zadarius Smith. So, again, you're the two teams you played for during your time in the league, your hometown team, the Lions are coming there. What's the thought about this one, man? Are you being pulled? I mean, you got that's Glover Quin in the Lions gear behind you, not in the Texans gear. So I mean, I know where your heart is, but this will be a good one.
Oh yeah, this is gonna be a good one. Yeah, and I've been getting pulled. People have been asking me the whole time, like, who you going for, who you rooting for, and for me, it's just one of those things where I honestly, I just want to watch the game. Yeah. I got a lot of love for Detroit. I had a great time in Detroit, my career there, but I got a lot of love for Houston too. I mean, and without Houston, I would have never had a chance to go to Detroit. Houston gave me my first opportunity to play in the NFL. I won 2 division titles in Houston, the first 2 in team history. So I got great relationships with them. And, the head coach there is DeMeco Ryans. He was my leader. He was my captain. He was my guy when I got drafted as a young guy. So he taught me a lot. He's a really good friend of mine. So I got a lot of friends and people in that organization. So, I got a lot of love for Houston. Obviously, I live here, but it's the same way with Detroit. I mean, the fans, I love it out there. I was just out there yesterday, and so I think the Lions will win this game. I think the Texans are hurt right now, and this honestly, these are my 2 Super Bowl picks. I picked the Lions against the Texans in the Super Bowl. Just because I do feel like both of those teams legitimately, I feel like the Texans, if they're healthy, defensively, offensively, I feel like they can come out of the AFC. And I think the Lions are clearly the best team in the NFC, and I think that they could come out. And so I picked those as my 2 Super Bowl teams. So yeah, it's gonna be one of those games where it's you pull it in both directions. But at the end of the day, I just want to see some good football, and I'm here to when the Lions make a good offensive play to talk about what the Texans did wrong defensively, and when the Texans make a good defensive play or offensive play to talk about what the other team did and why things happened, and I don't get, I don't lose any sleep over it. You know what I'm saying? So these are two teams that I played for. I mean, I played 4 years in Houston, played 6 years in Detroit. I was talking to Golden Tate yesterday, and he was saying how when the Lions and Seattle are teams we played, his whole thing is he just roots for the home team. Whoever's at home, that's who he's rooting for. So if that be the case, I'll obviously be rooting for Houston. I do a lot of work for the Texans, being that I live here. But I mean, I just want to see a good game and hope everybody comes out and healthy and plays well. You know what I'm saying? I just like to see good football.
There you go. So yeah, I mean, look, the Lions, like we've talked about through this whole episode, the Lions have proved that they can certainly win at home. They can win on the road. They can win bad weather. They can win indoors. They can beat you with special teams, defense. I mean, they've shown a little bit of all of that all year long, and it'll be interesting to see how they have to handle Houston. Again, you expect that, you see that at the beginning of the season. Dang, that's a high-powered offense. They added Joe Mixon. They added Stephon Diggs, and that's just not the same team right now without Diggs and without Nico Collins. So we'll see what the Texans look like on offense, see what the Lions look like on defense. Adding Zadarius Smith and might not be done for the day. I'm very anxious to see how that looks. I know Lions fans are very excited that Brad Holmes did make a move on trade deadline day. I think it ends today, right? 5 o'clock. Yeah. So handful of hours left for Brad Holmes to do more work if he chooses to do so. But got the big piece, I think, in Zadarius Smith.
And you got, even outside of that, Aaron Glenn, he played for the Texans back in the early days when the Texans first started up the franchise. Aaron Glenn was the corner. He was their guy. And so when I first met Aaron Glenn, I was in Houston. I was playing for the Texans, and I met Aaron Glenn. And, we've had our relationship throughout the whole time. And so, I mean, it's going to be just exciting for him as well to be back as a D coordinator, playing against, his former team as well. So it'll be fun. It's a great thing. I mean, these things happen every week. You got teams playing against, players playing against former players and friends and things like that. So it's not going to be that big of a deal, but I'm excited to be in the building. I will be there, Lord willing. And hopefully it's a great game.
We'll see Glover in the half Lions, half Texans jersey, like you see at some of those things. He'll make an appearance. No, I'm just kidding. But that's great that you'll be in the building, man. I mean, what an ambassador for both franchises, man. Glover always bringing the info, the behind the scenes, the experience, man. That's I love doing this pod because of that, man. What a perfect week to put you on display with your two former teams going at it. And I got the Lions too. Like I said, they've just shown to be the best team in the league right now. And like you said earlier on, if they don't beat themselves, they're not going to lose. And I think they're just rolling right now. That stat is still going strong. More offensive touchdowns than incompletions through the last, I think it's 6 games now. 26 touchdowns to just 24 incompletions for Jared Goff. Incredible stat. The Lions are humming. They'll be in Houston Sunday night, as will Glover Quin. He's GQ. I'm BB. We'll talk to you next week.